गर्मी हो गई है.
Next and the second last talk of Patanjali Yoga. Yeah. Right. Awesome.
All right. Namaste and welcome to the 18th and the second last session of Patanjali Yoga Sutra. And as always, because it's a sutra, we will just recap the main points from the earlier chapters. So there are 4 chapters in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. The first one is called Samadhi Pada. And in that, almost in the second shloka, Patanjali defines yoga. He says, Yogasya chitta vritti nirodha. That means stopping vrittis is the goal of yoga. And what is the explanation of this? Consciousness, our consciousness, Purusha as yoga calls it, is a field of pure awareness. It is complete stillness, equanimity, but we don't experience it as that, field of silence, field of equanimity, because there are always thoughts, emotions, feelings, which are kind of coming on top of consciousness. So we always experience our consciousness as our thoughts, feelings, emotions. And therefore, we never are able to see the real nature of consciousness, which is stillness. It keeps getting modified all the time. And this is what Patanjali calls vrittis. Vritti is nothing but, like a disturbance. When you throw a stone in a pond, the ripples which come out, that's vritti. So similarly, with all the stimulus coming from outside, the ripples on our consciousness. So, and stopping that vritti is yoga. When you stop that vritti, then you see the essential nature of pure consciousness. Now, there are 5 categories of vrittis, the 5 ways in which the consciousness gets disturbed. The first is pramana, which is right knowledge. You see a rope and it registers in your mind as a rope. That's one way a vritti can be caused. The other is viparyaya, or wrong knowledge. So you see a rope, but what registers in your mind is a snake. It's a wrong knowledge, but it still creates a disturbance in the mind. The third is vikalpa. You imagine things. So imagination is also a kind of a knowledge, and that also creates a disturbance. Nidra, this is very not so easy to understand. In deep sleep, we generally feel that there is no consciousness. Everything has folded up, but that's not true. The consciousness is still lurking, because when you wake up after a good sleep, you wake up fresh and you say, I had a good sleep. So consciousness is still there. So that also is, deep sleep is also a modification of consciousness. And smriti, which is past knowledge. You remember things, and from memory you recall things. That also creates a disturbance, right? And the method to stop the vrittis, the 2 engines of yoga, abhyasa and vairagya. Abhyasa is nothing but regular, uninterrupted practice of yoga, right? And vairagya is developing a dispassion. You are trying to control your senses from moving out towards the objects of the world. So this abhyasa and vairagya are the 2 engines on which yoga flies, right? And why do you need to do abhyasa and vairagya? Is to develop what is called samadhi prajna or samapati. So in normal mundane life, our minds are always clogged with thoughts and feelings and emotions. There's no quiet time. You're always involved in that. So, and in that state, you cannot meditate. So by this vairagya, abhyasa, and the practice of yoga, you quieten down the mind. You calm the mind down. Once the mind is calm, then there's a transformation in consciousness from this many thoughts to calmness. And in that calmness, sadhana can take place. right? So developing samadhi prajna is the intermediate goal of yoga. Then he says samadhi itself, this chapter talks about samadhi, it's addressing the yogi who has developed samadhi prajna, who's gone through the Ashtanga yoga and the earlier practices, and he's at an advanced level, intermediate advanced level. And so then he explains what samadhi is. And he says samadhi has got 4 steps. The first step is vitark. So in vitark, the mind is still active. Your thoughts are still going on, but the consciousness is still able to focus. It is not getting distracted, but the mind is still working. So if you are, say, focusing on a mantra, Om or Om Namah Shivaya, or you're focusing on an object, a symbol of Om or a lotus flower, then your mind is still thinking about the lotus flower. So the thought process is still on, but you're able to focus on that lotus flower, right? So that is the first level of samadhi. Your focus is there on the object of samadhi, of meditation, but you're thinking about that object. The second step is that this vitarka kind of matures into vichara, where the thinking stops. You're not thinking about the lotus, but you're just observing it. Your past impressions about the lotus, your conditioning about the lotus, conditioning about Om, whatever it is that you're focusing on, just stops. You just observe. You become a sakshi. You become an observer. So that's called vichara. Now vichara again matures into, even the observation stops and the lotus, just the mind becomes absolutely empty and the lotus reflects in the mind. So the mirror becomes absolutely clean and the object starts reflecting. So that's the third stage, which is called Shananda. And finally, Asmika, where then even that one object which is there disappears and only consciousness remains. All right. And there are 2 types in this. One is samadhi with bija. Samadhi with bija is that your karmas are still not resolved. They're still flowing. So there is a kind of a movement in your consciousness because of that. That's called samadhi with bij. And nirbija is when the yogi has, he's let the river of karmas flow out. Then is nirbija samadhi. And after the nirbija samadhi, the next step is kaivalya or moksha. So that was the first chapter. The second chapter, he talks about sadhana pada. So in the first chapter, he addressed the advanced yogi who's ready for samadhi meditation. In the second chapter, he addresses the intermediate yogi and then the novice yogi. So the intermediate yogi, he says that the yogi who has not yet developed the samadhi prajna, he prescribes what is called kriya yoga. Kriya yoga has 3 things: tapas or tapa, swadhyaya, and ishwar pranidhana. So what are these? So tapa is the continued practice of yoga, Ashtanga yoga. And the whole idea of this practice of yoga is to subdue your desires and your identification with your ego. So when you subdue your desires, the senses are not moving out because the objects outside are not as attractive as it is to a normal person, right? And this brings the mind to peace. So tapa is, just the practice of yoga. So you just subdue your desires, subdue your ego identification, and the mind is brought to peace. And it's only the peaceful mind which can then do swadhyaya. What is swadhyaya? Swadhyaya is self-study. Because you're at peace, the mind is at peace, you can watch your inner mechanism. You can watch how a thought arises, remains, and how it ebbs. How a feeling comes up and diffuses. How an emotion is generated and goes, right? You can actually see the vrittis. You can see all the 5 vrittis. You can see right knowledge, wrong knowledge, imaginary knowledge, memory, how the mind connects one thought to another thought, So you can see all that with Swadhyaya. And so therefore, the Swadhyaya teaches you to observe, to become a sakshi, to become a witness. And tapa has quietened the mind down. And with both these in Ishwar Pranidhana, you can actually experience your inner awareness. And that inner awareness is nothing but Ishwar, God, Purusha. All right. And there's another meaning to Ishwar Pranidhana is again to keep your mind calm, is to surrender fruits of all actions to Ishwar. To surrender all your actions to Ishwar so that you are not burdened. So both these will, this tapa, swadhyaya, and Ishwar Pranidhana, will ultimate goal is to develop a meditative consciousness, to get at least a glimpse of that pure awareness, right? Then he talks about the cause of human suffering. And human suffering, he says, are caused by the pancha klesha, or the 5 human afflictions. And there's a link between kleshas and karma, which I'll talk about. So the pancha kleshas, or the 5 afflictions, the starting point is avidya, or ignorance. And what is avidya or ignorance? It is to consider your body as real. So all philosophies talk about it. All the Indian philosophy, Jainism, Buddhism, Advaita, everybody talks about it. To consider your body, which is not real, to be real is avidya, right? And once you consider the body to be real, then the sense of I-ness and mindness comes, which is asmita, the ego sense, right? So avidya leads to asmita. And asmita is what gives you the will, the ichcha to do things, right? And what do you do or don't do? You run after things which will give you pleasure, because you are identified as a body. So you will try to please the demands of the body. So you run after things which are pleasurable. It's called raga. And you will run away from things which give you pain, which is called dvesha. So the avidya leads to asmita, and then leads to raga and dvesha. You're running after pleasurable things and running away from painful things. And again, because you identify with the body, you cling to life. A yogi who has transcended this, so he knows he is not the body. For him, there's no death. He knows he's Atman, which never dies. So, but ordinary people, they because of the body identification, they are clinging to life. So these are the 5 kleshas: avidya, asmita, raga, dvesha, and abhinivesha, which is clinging to life, right? And this is at the root of human suffering. Because you think you're the body and you're trying to please the body, and that pleasing the body or avoiding pain is never ending. And then you're caught in a cycle. So this pancha kleshas will lead you to desires and aversions and fears, which will lead you to actions, and the actions will cause karmas, which will further perpetuate more desires, more action, and more klesha. So klesha, karma, klesha is a vicious cycle, right? And then finally, in this chapter, he talks about Ashtanga Yoga, which is yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. We have gone through this, all right? In the second chapter, which is Vibhuti Pada, very interesting chapter, he talks about the powers which yogis get. Yogis get lots of powers. They can become invisible, they can become small, they can become big, they can become heavy, they can become light as a feather, they can walk on the water, they can levitate. So yogis do all this stuff, right? So he talks about how yogis get these powers. And he says there's a way of concentrating, which is called samyama. There's a way of focusing the power of your consciousness on something. And it's called samyama. Samyama is the combination of dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. So unlike in the English language, when you say meditation is one word, but here there are, in yoga, there are actually four different things. Dharana, dhyana, samadhi, samyama. The four different things. So what is dharana? Dharana, as we said, is the mundane mind is always afflicted with lots of thoughts. So, it's chanchal, because it's splitting from one thought to another thought. It's called chanchal. You have to bring it to ekagrata, which means you have to bring it to a single pointed focus. And how do you do that? You take a object, whatever you can take your breathing, you can take a mantra like Om Namah Shivaya. You can take an object like a lotus, and you train your mind to focus on that one object and subdue all other thoughts. So it is done by your own effort, dharana. And when dharana gets perfected, then that consciousness which is flowing towards that object starts flowing very effortless. It's like pouring oil from a oil can into a pot. It's a very smooth flow. You pour water and go gut, but oil just flows smoothly, right? So that is dhyana, where the consciousness is flowing uninterrupted, effortlessly. It is not your effort. You have done the effort to do dharana, and it has matured into dhyana. And finally, samadhi. Samadhi is when even that one object which you're focusing on, that object is also gone. So there's only consciousness which is, and you're absorbed in that consciousness. That is samadhi. And samyama is doing all these three, dharana, dhyana, samadhi, together. So a good example is, when you're learning to drive a car, you're struggling between brake, clutch, and accelerator, But when you are proficient, then it happens automatically. You don't have to worry about it. So similarly, samyama is simultaneous dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So it is actually a transformation of consciousness, the power of consciousness. You can focus on anything. And when you focus that samyama on any object, you come to know that object completely, you get all its powers. It's as simple as that. So if you do samyama on a lotus flower, you become the lotus flower. You know it inside out. You know it from, you become it. So you know how it grows, how it flowers, everything about it. And this is how yogis get complete power over nature. They can manipulate nature at will, because through this power of samyama, they have complete control over nature. And nature is just a fabric which is in the entire cosmos, and we are all part of that fabric. So all the yogi has done is moved out of the limits of his body into the entire fabric of nature in the entire cosmos. So he can tap into all its powers. However, these powers are not to be displayed. They're not to be used. Now, this is a one of the problems of spirituality is it gives you powers which you can use destructively, and it gives you powers which can take you to like immense sublimity. So the choice is yours. If you use the powers, at some point in time, the powers will go away from you. You will become what Patanjali calls yog bhrasht. That means you're destroyed. You're destroyed so badly that it will take you many lifetimes to come back. So this power is not to be used. They're just steps. These powers are just steps to moksha. So these are not to be used at all. So that's important. And finally, the fourth chapter, of which we had one session last time, and this is the continuation of that. And so we saw broadly two things. One is how the yogi can use his power to burn up karmas fast. So actually, a yogi can create holograms of himself. He can create artificial minds and bodies of himself, and go through his karma simultaneously. What in sequence would have taken a much longer time, he can do like 10 karmas at the same time. So he's running through his karmas faster. You have to run through your karmas. There's no two ways about that. So he can run through his karmas simultaneously by creating artificial minds and bodies of him, clones of himself, right? So this was one thing we covered. And we also covered the concept of samskaras. So whenever we act, after the action is over, it's not over. Action never gets over when it's over, because things which the action gave you get imprinted in the mind. Oh, I like this. I didn't like this. I like this very much. This was terrible, you know. Oh, so and so is bad. So and so is good. All that stuff happens with action. And all that action gets imprinted in your subtle psyche as what is called samskaras. It becomes like grooves. And over a period of time, this samskaras gives you your tendencies and character. So, for example, you observe people. So there are some people who like solitude, who like classical music, who like peaceful conversation. You know, so their samskaras are like that, right? There are some people you meet who are very stimuli oriented. They want to go to pubs and parties and be with people and rock music and dance, you know, so they just need stimulus to remain energized. Okay, so that's another kind of samskara. So rajas driven samskaras, right? And there are some people who are, you know, who enjoy doing bad things to others. All right, so I'm just giving as an example. So that is why in our language it has come, this person has got very good samskar. Iske samskar अच्छे हैं. And this person has got terrible samskar. Iske bure samskar hain, right? So this is seeped into our language, right? So this is what of the first chapter, the Vibhuti Pada, sorry, Kaivalya Pada, which we covered last time. Today we will talk about the metaphysics of yoga. And we'll first talk about time and space. This is very interesting. So it's a flight, it's like quantum physics kind of flight. So what in shloka number 12, Patanjali says that past and future exist in the now. You have heard this in movies and things, you know, the Matrix, those kind of stuff, those kind of movies, you have heard this. Past and future exist in the now. And therefore, why are they not experienced in the now, past and future? Because there are different planes. So this is what the shloka says. Let's understand this. So what it says is the past, future, and present, they all exist at the same time. And why is this? So all our philosophies, yoga included, Advaita Vedanta included, Buddhism, the Mahayana Buddhism included, they all say that there is a substratum. So that substratum is what yoga calls Purusha, what Advaita Vedanta calls Brahman, what Buddhism, Mahayana Buddhism calls Shunyata, or emptiness, the void, the great void. Okay, so that is a substratum, and other than the substratum, there's nothing else. I can't even explain it. I can't even, if I explain to you as a tabletop or as a net, then your mind will think, well, net is on what? On what is it hooked? Or what is below the net? Or what is above the net? Nothing of that sort. You can't even imagine it. Just imagine it. There's nothing else but that. Shunyata, Brahman, Purusha, that's it. That's all there is. And everything, all forms are appearing on that substrate. So if that is the case, what is happening is that the present is existing in form. So, for example, right now, you can see the form of Vinod, Chaku, Nilu, Ramesh. You can see the form. You can hear my voice. So there's form, right? There's matter. We are matter. We are in a matter state. Tomorrow morning, this is gone, because this becomes the past. All right. But where has the past gone? It cannot go anywhere. It has to be in the substratum. There's nowhere else. It can't fall off outside the substratum. There's nothing outside the substratum. Substratum is all there is. So how does it exist in substratum? As energy. So it exists in the substratum in energy form. So, simple quantum physics, don't have to be a physicist, simple quantum physics, energy and matter are interchangeable. That we all know. Simple quantum physics we know. So this form is transformed into energy, and the energy remains in the substratum, right? And in the future, we know how the future is created. We are doing action, desire, action, karma, more desire, action, karma. So when we go into the future, we take the energy out of the substratum, because substratum is the one which has the energy, and create form over there. So the past and the future remain in the substratum as energy, while the present exists in form, as matter. Okay. And a yogi who has transcended this and has kind of become the substratum. He has gone away from this incessant change, past, present. He's transcended time, transcended space. So he can see this entire cosmos, time and space, as a vestibule, or as a worm, or as a snake, coming from beginningless past, beginningless past, and he can see the future. He can see his own many lifetimes and own future lifetimes. He can see it as like a worm. All right. So the past, present, and future all exist in the substratum, and the yogi transcends it, because now he has burnt all his karmas, and now whatever action he takes is without any desire. What the Bhagavad Gita calls Nishkam karma, right? And he abides in that consciousness. He has no desire to extract anything from the substratum. He is the substratum. So he can see everything, the past, present, future, all together at the same time. He can see it. So that is what is meant by the past, future, and present exist in the now. All right. Later on, if you have questions about this, I'll be glad to answer. Right. And what is the nature of this energy matter? What's the nature of energy matter? So again, physics explains it as packets of energy, electrons, protons, neutrons, that kind of a thing. You can link it. I mean, somebody who knows physics better than I do could link it to what I'm going to talk about, the gunas. The gunas are the one which transform. Gunas are the one which give rise to energy and which give rise to form. And what are the gunas? So there are three gunas. One is sattva gun. Sattva guna is illuminative energy. So it's at a personal level. When if you say I'm a sattvic person, somebody is a sattvic person, basically means that person's mind is so clean and clear. He's so still and calm that the consciousness can reflect in his mind. So that's why it's called illuminative energy. He can experience the illumination of Purusha, Brahman, Atman, whatever you choose to call it. He can experience it. So that's illuminative energy. It's uplifting energy, spiritually uplifting energy, right? Then the rajas is active energy. Rajas is what propels action or movement. That is rajas, right? While tamas is inert energy. Tamas is the energy where there's so much layering on the mirror, there's so much grime and dust on the mirror that you can't see any reflection. And at a personal level, it is sloth, it is inactivity, it is even getting your pleasure out of disturbing the peace of others. So all that is tamas. So this three energies are there in Prakriti. The foundation of Prakriti are these three energies, right? And these three energies are in a dynamic equilibrium at all times. That means the proportion of sattva, rajas, and tamas keeps changing, but they are in an equilibrium. They don't like break up. So the sattva, rajas, tamas never breaks up. They always remain together, but in a dynamic by balance, right? And this energy is what gives rise to form. So, whenever there's dynamic equilibrium, there's form. And but there are sometimes when it becomes stable, the stable equilibrium. That means sattva, rajas, and tamas are absolutely balanced. So there's no movement. And that is the unmanifest state. That is the energy state, right? And we can also understand we understood time. Now we can understand the role of space. So space is what determines form, because space has dimension, and time determines movement from unmanifest to manifest, back to unmanifest, right? From energy to matter, back to energy. And when the yogi kind of eliminates the gunas, not eliminates, but he transcends the gunas, becomes gunatita, then he transcends space and time. All right. So the other thing about this gunas is that gunas is what gives each one of us our uniqueness. So this rajas, tamas, sattva is never in the same proportion in any two things. So each one is unique. So at one level, a man is different from a horse, is different from a tree, is different from a stone. So different categories. But even within the human being species, two individuals are not the same. And again, this will help us understand space. So everything that exists occupies a unique spot in the space-time matrix. Okay. And the dimensions of this matrix, one of course is time, past, present, future. And there are different planes in the space, from gross physical space to the psychic and mental space and to the astral space, right? And this whole time and space also arise from the gunas. The gunas is the constituent of Prakriti, and time and space is part of Prakriti. So it arises from there. And when the yogi again transcends this gunas, he transcends space and time. That's when he can see past, present, future, everything, from all beginning past to endless future. He can see everything at the same time, right? So this is as far as yoga's Patanjali's conception of space, time, and gunas. And we will now talk about mind and object. Now here I have to do some explanation. So Advaita Vedanta is monist. That means it says only Brahman exists. And this entire creation is Maya. It's an appearance. Nothing has got created. It's just an appearance. Why it appears, we don't know. It's the power of Maya which creates all this, which makes things appear as it is. So only Brahman. So it's only mind, really. Then Mahayana Buddhism, it says that there's no object out there. Your mind is creating that object. So it's slightly different from Advaita. Advaita Vedanta says only Brahman, only the cosmic Brahman is there. And entire cosmos dancing on Brahman is the appearance. While Mahayana Buddhism says that, there's no object out there. Your mind is creating those objects, right? Yoga is dualist. That means it says there is Prakriti, which is one reality, and there is consciousness, which is another reality. There are two different realities. It's a dualist philosophy. Do I agree with it? No. The most logical explanation is the Vedantic, the Advaita Vedanta explanation. But this is what yoga says. And how do they argue this? It says that for the same object, different minds perceive the same object differently, and the same mind perceives the same object differently through time. So the example they give, and I've just reversed the gender over there from the example given in the thing. So the same man is perceived differently by his wife, mother, and sister. Man is the same, right? And the same man is perceived by his wife differently from when the time he was a young man to when he becomes an old man. Okay. So he says, since different minds are looking at the same object differently, it cannot be the imagination of a single mind. So therefore, they say that is why yoga says they argue. Yoga argues that the mind and matter, mind and objects are two different domains. Do I agree with it? No. I think Vinod, when he talks about Vedanta, he can talk about it. There's a totally different explanation. All right. But this is what yoga says. So what happens when the medium of cognition, continuing with this discussion, what happens when the medium of cognition is not there? So there's a saying that if a tree falls in a forest and nobody sees it, did the tree fall? It's like a koan, it's like a puzzle. And the answer yoga gives is yes, it did fall. So it says that even if you disappear in Kaivalya, the objects remain there for others. So it continues to exist for others. So it's not dependent. Objects, the whole point yoga is making the objects are not dependent on one single mind. So if, the question is, if one person becomes, attains moksha, will do all the objects disappear? No, it doesn't. It remains there for others, is the point I'm making. And so the next thing he talks about is how the mind is different from Purusha. So it says you must understand how how the mind works. How do you cognize things? How do you get knowledge? So what happens is that your senses, they move outward and get entangled with objects out there. And then they send a signal to the mind, and that signal reflects in the mind. So mind is a mirror. The signal reflects on the mind. But the mind is insentient. The mind doesn't have any light of its own. It's like the sun has got light, the moon doesn't have light. The moon reflects the light of the sun, and that's why it appears bright in the sky. Okay. So the mind is like that. The mind doesn't have any light of its own. So the object is reflecting in the mind. The mind has become that object. And Purusha is shining the light. So all the intelligence, the knowledge, the cognition is coming because of the light of Purusha. And therefore, the mind and Purusha are two different things, is a point he's making. And it is also possible in yoga to perceive the mind as an object. A yogi who starts getting direct perception, he can perceive the mind as an object. He can see his own mind. All right. So therefore, Purusha and mind are two different things. And the last point in today's talk is, how do we get to know Purusha? How do we self-cognize? How do we cognize our own self, our own Purusha? So Purusha is the light. How do we self-cognize? And it's again very simple. We saw the mind is a reflective surface. But the mind becomes the object. So mind becomes the lotus flower, and Purusha shines the light on the reflection, and then you know, oh, that's the lotus flower, right? That's how you get knowledge. But through yoga, you reach a stage where there are no objects, there are no thoughts, there are no emotions, there are no feelings. There's absolutely nothing reflecting on the mirror from the outside, from the created world, from the outside world. There's nothing at all reflecting. The mind has become a clean surface. And when that happens, Purusha reflects in the mind becomes a Purusha, and Purusha lights itself up. And once you reach that state, you become, and once the stage becomes very steady for the yogi, Kaivalya is not far away. So that's it. I'm happy to take questions. Unmute, Chaku. Unmute. Unmute. You're still muted. Click on that microphone on the left. Yeah. Talk. Now you can talk. No, you're still unmuted, still muted. Yeah.
Oh, I had the earphones on. Maybe that had something to do with it.
Possible.
No, I'm saying one has to first assimilate what you said before you can ask questions.
I understand. This is a flight of fancy.
Yeah, you have to think
it is matrix and inception and everything all put together.
How it works, and then we can ask questions.
I understand. But it's simply this. Just get one thing. The mind is insentient. It doesn't appear insentient because we can't distinguish the mind from the underlying consciousness. It's joined in our mundane existence. So we think that the mind is intelligent.
Yeah.
Actually, it is not. Mind is just a mirror. Mind is simply a mirror, and all objects reflect on the mind, and the consciousness is the one which lights up that reflection, and you come to know. And what is yoga saying is that through the practice of yoga and sadhana, you can reach a stage where you have trained yourself not to move out at all. So no object is reflecting on the mind, no thought is reflecting on the mind, no emotion, no feelings. Complete equanimity, complete silence. When that happens, the Purusha itself reflects in the mirror and lights itself up. And that is when the mind becomes the Purusha and realizes Purusha, which is what is moksha. So you use the instrument of the mind and bring it from a very low level where it is involved with everything outside, all thoughts, feelings, emotions, and slowly you purify the mind to make it empty. Once you make it empty, then the Purusha just boom flows through. So if you understand this, I mean, all philosophies say the same thing in different. There are nuances, as I said. Yoga is dualistic, Advaita is monistic, and so on and so forth. All that stuff is there, but this is the basic thing.
What is this mirror trying to show you then? Why does it happen? What is it trying to say?
What the Shastras say, that we are all programmed at some point in time to get to a stage where we realize that all this life and going after things is suffering. But what the Buddha said it very clearly, that samsara is suffering, life is suffering, and therefore it is pushing you towards. There's a sense within you. You may not be able to put a finger on it, but a sense within you that this is not real. There's something else, and then it takes you. So, and all our practices.
So why do we go through this unreal then?
That's the way it is. It's an axiom. It's an axiom. That's the way.
It has no meaning.
No. The meaning is there, that you are going to realize the truth. So to that extent, there is meaning. But it's not meaningless in a very, what should I say, in an existential sense or a absurd sense. It's not absurd. When you say life has no meaning in a Western sense, then you're talking about absurdity, angst, all that kind of stuff. it's all random. It's not that. It's not random at all. There's a complete design to it, complete
No,
order to it. Order.
if it's a mirror, it's supposed to show you something of yourself, right?
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying.
If
So
it's a mirror.
so if it's a mirror,
So then probably our job is our job to cut our experience or to enhance or to understand our experience.
so, yeah, exactly the point. So if the mirror is supposed to show you something when you're in a very mundane life, what the mirror is showing you, whatever you bring to it from outside. So you bring your likes, dislikes, fears, which pop up as object, you bring it. And that's what the mirror is reflecting. And then you reach a stage where you're saying, I had enough of this. It's all suffering.
Yeah.
I'm in a house on fire. So it's all suffering. And I don't want this anymore. So then you start a journey.
Atul,
Atul, one minute.
Why the mirror example?
Then you start a journey, and the same mind can reflect the reality to you. Okay, sorry, Vinod. I just want to complete the thought before you.
Just to answer Shaku, why the mirror example is taken, there's a very simple logic to it. When you look at your mind, innumerable thoughts have been produced over your lifetime. If you just go and keep thinking how many thoughts this mind has generated, right? Now, if you just do a count, it may be in millions, if not more. Now, this mind has produced so many. Has the mind got diminished in any way? Has it shrunk in any way?
Good point.
Or is it still capable of producing another 1 million? Now, can you think of anything which produces, but there is no diminishing in it? Nothing happens to it. It just remains the way it is. Now, that's where the analogy of the mirror comes. You can show the mirror to X, Y, Z directions, keep on moving it. It will keep on producing images. Nothing happens to the mirror. It just keeps reflecting, and that's it. So they say that mirror is the closest example. It's not absolutely the real thing, but it's a closest example to the mind, where we want to bring out the potential of the mind as a very a very unique entity which doesn't get diminished. So what is happening is it just takes impressions, right, and shows it to the Purusha. What Atul was referring to, the real entity which you are, which is divine component. So that Purusha is actually produces the light of awareness on what is getting reflected. So so I will just stick to the mind. So this is how the mind is related to the mirror. Okay. Now the thing which intrigued me in Atul's talk, because it's a very, very, very deep sutras he has taken us through, almost 10 of them. He started with the future and the past are inhering in the reality, in that substratum.
That's very interesting.
Which is always there. Now, when we examine both the past and the future, the past always came as a present, right? It always appeared as present. The future will always come in only as presence. So the existence of future or the past is really something which is notionally, the whole sutra is actually a notional that, okay, it is the Purusha holds both of them, right? The substratum holds both of them only to the extent that in reality there is only what is there now. There's nothing beyond that. And even that now changes the moment you say now, and you start focusing on that, it has already become the past. It's the time is such a fallacious thing. That is why in Advaita Vedanta we say, the Purusha is beyond time. It's beyond space. Time doesn't exist for the Purusha. But somehow in Yoga Sutra, they have given some credence to both past and present. And then he ends with a sutra which he just concluded, where he says that two things cannot happen simultaneously. That means the Vishaya and the Chitta, okay, both cannot be there together. Now it's a very, very confusing thing to a layman, because we say, yes, there is someone who's aware. There is that some entity, call it the Purusha, who's there. And he's able to see what is happening. We say the mind is reflecting, so it is able to see the mind. So it is able to see the Vishaya. So we can look at the Vishaya and also feel that we are the observer of the Vishaya. So there is a school of thought which says that the consciousness in a way splits itself into the object or the object of perception, that is the Vishaya. Vishaya is what? It's an object of perception. And it becomes the perceiver, right? And then the perception happens. So the awareness is splitting into the three. We call it the Triputi. And it happens simultaneously. And a yogi can be aware of that. He's aware of his own sublime beingness, presence, and he can also see the Vishayas appearing in that, in his field of awareness. If you're an adept, you get that ability, and that is a great place to be, because then you realize that everything is awareness. Even the Vishaya is appearing in awareness. It is a form. It's like a condensation in the awareness or an appearance in the awareness. So it is only awareness. So all the world becomes only awareness. So the multiplicity becomes one. That's the beauty of, that's where the Advaita Vedanta takes us. Here he is saying that it is just not possible for the two things to exist together. In fact, I wanted Atul to sort of elaborate on it here. What exactly is he saying that these two things cannot exist together?
Which two things?
In perception, we know that we are separate from the things perceived. So we are aware of our own separation from the things perceived, right? But we know that it is in our own awareness when it is happening.
No, I think he's countering the Advaita Vedanta view that that mind and matter is just, there is only mind. Basically, Advaita Vedanta says only mind.
Only mind, yeah.
Only mind.
It's only appearance in the mind.
Only mind.
Is it mind as we know it, or is it emotion? What if it is only, if it's energy, it's only emotion, it can't be mind?
No, here, when you're talking about mind in Vedanta and all, talking just about consciousness. So emotion and all, the underlying consciousness is what you're talking about.
I would rather put it that Atul, as consciousness.
But just 1 minute, just 1 second. So what Vedanta says that only Brahman exists. So does actually the higher Vajrayana Buddhism. It calls it the light of pure awareness. Only that exists. And everything is just dancing on it. Why these things are dancing on it, we don't know. So we don't know. I think the clue which I get from studying Buddhism is that if there was no things, there'll be no awareness other than just pure awareness. There'll be no cognition. So that's the only clue I can get from reading, say, Buddhism. But Advaita says only Brahman, there's nothing else. All those things are appearances. They're Maya. They have no essence. They're all impermanent. They're bubbles. They're bubbles. They have no existence.
Okay, Atul. Atul, now come back to what you said. You made a mention that Chitta or the mind is just a reflecting medium, right? If mind is just a reflecting medium, where to take Shaku's question further, where do emotions come in? Where does anger come in? Where does love come in? Where does passion?
No, this is the problem. So this is the kind of objection which other schools make to Advaita Vedanta. We were discussing it last time. So, for example,
even the Yoga Sutra said that, no?
No,
that
no,
it is just reflecting. There
no,
was a term
no.
which came in.
So that emotion, anger, joy, all that stuff comes from raga, dvesha, and it comes from there. So even Vedanta it recognizes it. Advaita Vedanta recognizes those emotions and but says they're unreal.
No, so can we say mind is just reflecting? Can we say this point?
Mind is insentient. So actually, if you look at Vedanta, it says mind and all in pralaya it will dissolve. Only thing that will remain is your.
No, Vedanta says that mind is an expression of the Brahman. Brahman
Yes.
is in a vibratory state. When it sort of vibrates, it creates this illusion.
It's a reflection of
mind
the
is
Brahman.
illusory.
Mind is absent.
Yeah,
of course, it exists temporarily.
It exists.
So that's what Vedanta says. Tantra says, no, that reflection is also real. Tantra says that reflection is also real.
No, don't go to Tantra. Stay with Yoga Sutra.
Yoga Sutra says that matter and consciousness are two separate realities. The essence of matter is the gunas, rajas, tamas, sattva, and the essence of chitta consciousness is chetana, consciousness. All right. So, but they're two separate realities. So, but there are a lot of objections to this theory. One objection is if there are two separate realities, how do they interact? How do two separate realities which have?
I got a sense. Atul, I got a sense that it is three. There are three actually. There is the reflective mind. There is the Purusha, which is completely, non-functional. It is just there as an observer, or gives the energy to the.
But at a higher level, the reflective mind also goes away.
Now, third is the gunas. See, the third part is the gunas. No, in your whole talk, what I could get was there is the reflective, then there is the gunas, which have got their own those tendencies, which are.
So the mind is part of Prakriti, and the essence of Prakriti are the gunas, and Prakriti has a separate existence.
Right.
Well, consciousness is pure.
Right.
So the whole kaivalya in yoga is to extricate the Purusha from the grip of Prakriti and realize that it is independent of Prakriti.
Correct.
And the three gunas are the foundation. So what there's some other philosophy like the Jain philosophy says the bottom of a substance, the guna is Pudgala, atom, Anu. Vaisheshika says Anu, right? Atom. So in yoga they say the three gunas are the foundation of Prakriti.
Right.
Prakriti is made of the gunas.
So that is where
and
come back to
Purusha has got entangled with it.
Yeah.
And when you separate the Purusha through yoga, you separate it and you realize Purusha is independent of Prakriti, that is Kaivalya.
Correct. So the gunas are the cause for passion. The gunas are the cause for love.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Gunas
are well said. Yeah, yes, absolutely.
That is what is sullying the pristine nature of the mind, the pure reflective mind.
And this is very well expressed in Bhagavad Gita, that the whole guna and
here also in your Yoga Sutra it has come. But it starts with the reflection, the reflective mind. Then it brings the guna concept, which you elaborated, the Sat, Raj, and Tama. And then it says, go for the gunatita, transcend the gunas. Understand that you are not, you can go beyond the gunas, and that is liberation. Once you go beyond.
I think it's in the 12th or 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where the gunas at a human level.
14th chapter.
14th chapter. The gunas at the human level is very well explained. Simply
Yes.
very well.
So, Saku, don't get worried. These are all concepts, maybe new to you, but once you start, trying to sort of understand gunas, understand the mind, and understand that which is unaffected by all of this. If you understand these three, then Yoga Sutras, broadly, you can understand anything of the Yoga Sutras.
I never accept concepts, without trying to figure out how it would apply to what I do every day. In the sense that the concepts come after my thinking, not before. I don't like to read also too much, because then how do I say, it becomes distant from you. So I always think about things, and then when something is said later on, then I try to connect the two. But I don't readily accept concepts first. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? So
Yeah,
when
but
I
but
am
once you're
asking
no, but
questions, I
once you're
ask
trading,
questions.
hey,
I
Shaku,
cannot ask questions or participate in theory without actually seeing how would it apply in my own way of things. You know what I'm trying to say? I don't
yeah,
know if
but
you
Yeah.
look at your education, Shaku. Whatever you learned over the
yeah.
years, whether you are a
Yes.
master or you are a bachelor,
Yeah.
you had to go through a rigor of understanding
Yes.
concepts, understanding theories, and then
No,
after that you became independent, and now you can talk and say, listen, now I've understood things, and I will see it in my frame of reference. Now, when you're walking the spiritual path, here too, you will
huh.
have to start. You have to start with the fundamentals of spirituality, which Atul took us through. The Yoga Sutras actually are a very profound text. But if you
Very
don't
profound.
No,
understand
no, I appreciate those. I
yeah,
appreciate those. But what I'm trying to say is that first I watch myself. And then the concept, when it follows, I understand the concept. I don't know the concept and then try to understand
No,
anything.
I get it.
So he has
Say,
told me the concept. I would have to see how does it apply to my personal experience before I actually understand it, or so to say. You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So I don't start with concepts because those are alien to me and they have no meaning in a sense. You know, I like it when the concept follows my own personal thinking.
awesome.
awesome.
Great.
Yeah,
Stay,
Great
stay,
to
stay,
see.
stay with that.
I
Yeah.
don't know. You know, I'll tell you one thing. There is also instinct. You know,
No, no,
when the time is right for a concept to be given to you,
Yeah,
yeah.
comes
No,
to
no,
you.
we understand where
You
you're
know?
coming from.
yeah,
Shaku, we
absolutely.
Yeah.
completely get you. We completely get, and we are completely with you. Stay with that, as Atul says, stay with that. And
Yeah.
let it be a slow and steady progress. Okay. Let it
You know,
just
it's
go.
not just watching. You know, maybe you don't, but you know, you sometimes you get something comes to you from you don't know
Yeah.
where,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
things fall into place.
Okay.
So, Atul, let me digress a little bit. We were talking about what next from here. Maybe next talk you will finish the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you take up Nyayik and Vaisheshika? Those are two, streams of philosophy,
Mm.
and you seem to have read a lot of it. Is it
I,
possible for you to take those?
I can. Right now, I am studying Buddhism. So I've already read about 10 books, including Shaku, your great grandfather-in-law's book on Buddhism. I mean,
But but
he-
but Atul, when you are looking at an audience which is a Sanatan Dharma,
uh,
and we have such a rich body of knowledge, and you having had your PhD and your research
mm.
in the Hindu philosophies, and Nyayik and Vaisheshika are two things which most people are not aware of.
I
They will
can
understand Vedanta.
I can talk about it. I need to study a little more. So I would suggest that you take the Vedanta one first, and I'll come back. I'll have to study a little
Yeah, the
more.
problem for me is I have not studied it academically. I have studied it experientially. You know
Right.
what Chaku is
Talk,
saying.
talk from
So,
experience.
so experiential becomes very difficult to communicate because it becomes very personal. Whereas
Okay.
academic understanding transcends the personal biases. It's
Let
something
me.
like physics. A person in US can study physics, a person in India studies physics, they'll come to the same conclusions.
So what I've
Similarly
studied,
for
I
Vedanta.
know. What
Yeah.
I've studied is people have written books on philosophy like Surendranath Dasgupta, very, very learned man, Radhakrishnan, people like that. But what I'm doing now is I'm reading the original text, the
Yeah.
Vaisheshika Sutra, Nyaya Sutra, translations of that. So
Yeah.
Buddhism, I'm reading the original. Uh,
Nagarjuna, you're reading
Nagarjuna तो बाद में है, उसके पहले the Buddha sermons,
Buddha
the,
sermons.
the Heart
Absolutely.
Sutra, the
Yeah.
Shanti Deva, Asvaghosha. So I'm reading all that stuff now, and it has given me a
So,
much better understanding of Buddhism. So
yeah, so
I'm going to get to Vaisheshika Nyaya after this, immediately after Buddhism. I'll get
yeah,
there.
that'll be great. Yeah, that'll be great. So we'll take
But
a gap, no problem.
we'll take
When
a gap.
you're ready for it, let's take it from there.
But in the next talk, when I conclude Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it will be on Kaivalya itself, on moksha itself. The last 10 odd sutras will be
Awesome.
on
Wonderful.
moksha itself.
Thanks.
So,
Thanks.
Chandru, you had a question. I think we stopped you in the.
No, I just
Bhaiya,
want to say
apni-
that.
Bhaiya, any ending comments? Because we have
Just
crossed our 1 hour.
just
So
Chandru's
we can
question.
continue our.
Actually, you can stop the recording. Let
We
Chandru
can
ask
just I can switch off the recording and then we can continue the discussion.
Yeah, Chandru.
Is that
say-
okay?
Yeah,
Only only two things. I mean, just like a child when it's growing, it develops the mind, and as it goes along and towards